Hello, and welcome. Tonight, we invite you to settle in, perhaps lie back, soften your breathing, and let your thoughts wander gently, as we take a long, deep, and quiet journey into the slow turning of centuries, to witness, with calm detachment, the fading grandeur of one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. You're listening to Historical Nights, where history moves at the pace of candlelight, where the past drifts like smoke across the surface of a quiet mind. Our journey tonight is one of slow unraveling. Of a world that once stood mighty, and over generations, quietly crumbled. We will explore the fall of the Roman Empire, not in a blaze of battles and cataclysm, but through the soft erosion of daily life, through subtle shifts in power, through quiet streets once alive with the rhythm of empire, now sinking into silence. We will begin, not with emperors or armies, but among the ordinary people. In the dusty courtyards of Roman villas. In the crowded alleyways of forgotten towns. In the still kitchens and granaries of lives long past. Tonight's journey unfolds in 4 parts. First, we will walk slowly through the daily life of late imperial Rome, what it felt like to live in a time when the world was changing, but not all at once. Then, we will turn toward a single thread, a biography, an event, a pivotal moment that casts light on the unraveling of this immense tapestry. In our third part, we will drift into the realm of archaeology and mystery, examining how clues left in the soil and stone tell quiet stories of decline. And finally, we will look at the social contrasts, the distant lives of senators and slaves, of emperors and monks, and how, in those contrasts, the end of Rome quietly took shape. So now, take a deep breath. Let the noise of the day fall away. And imagine yourself, somewhere in the twilight of the Roman world. The rhythm of their lives, steady, fading, enduring. Imagine yourself, stepping out into the cool morning air of a small town in southern Gaul, around the year 450 of the Common Era. The sky is just beginning to pale with the touch of dawn, and the soft, earthy scent of dew still clings to the stone walls of your modest home. This is not the Rome of Augustus, nor of Trajan. The distant imperial capital, once the beating heart of the world, is now far removed from daily life. Ravenna, in the marshes of northern Italy, serves as the western court, and even that court feels brittle, disconnected. Yet life continues. In towns and villages scattered across the provinces, people rise, eat, walk, work, and sleep. Their routines follow a familiar pulse, a rhythm shaped not by emperors, but by seasons, harvests, and faith. Let us walk with them. From dawn to dusk. Through the rhythms of a day in the waning light of the Western Roman Empire. The first light spills across worn rooftops. In this small Gallic town, once a Roman colonia, you can still see echoes of the old empire. Crumbling arches stand at crossroads. Stones engraved with Latin names serve as bench seats or walls in newer buildings. The baths still exist, though they are seldom used now. The water doesn't flow as freely, and firewood is expensive. The day begins early, particularly for those who labor. In the quiet courtyard of a modest domus, a woman kneels to grind grain using a handheld quern. Her hands move slowly, rhythmically. She hums an old tune, passed down through generations. The bread she prepares will be coarse, made from barley or spelt, and flavored with herbs from her small kitchen garden. Nearby, a pot of lentils simmers gently over embers laid carefully the night before. The scent rises in warm layers, earthy, comforting. A child stirs in a straw-filled mattress, rubbing sleep from their eyes. The day holds small tasks, helping with animals, collecting water, learning psalms from a traveling priest, perhaps. Schoolhouses are fewer now. Where once rhetoricians taught Latin verse, now instruction is more often religious, simpler, more oral. The streets are quiet but not empty. Vendors set out cloths displaying worn tools, earthenware bowls, and baskets of dried fruit. An old man sharpens knives by the town gate. The metal hisses softly against the stone. Above it all, the church bells ring, a sound newer than the forum, but more enduring now. By midday, the town is in motion. You pass the old forum. Weeds grow in cracks where senators once debated. Now, it is a market, small, scattered. Traders from nearby villages lay out goods, honey, wool, preserved fish wrapped in leaves. There are fewer coins now, many pay in kind, eggs for cloth, grain for salt. A butcher offers cuts of pork, and beside him a woman sells small wheels of goat cheese wrapped in vine leaves. The language spoken is Latin, but softened, flavored by local dialects. You hear traces of old Celtic roots, hints of Germanic tones. In the shade of an archway, a magistrate listens to a land dispute. His robes are simple, nothing like the finery once worn in the Senate. The scrolls he consults are fewer, faded. But justice, however localized, still matters. Nearby, a family repairs a cart. The father's hands are blackened with pitch. His son, perhaps 10 years old, watches carefully, mimicking the motions. Trade skills pass not through guilds anymore, but through memory and example. In the bathhouse, what remains of it, a few men soak in tepid water. The caldarium has cooled, its furnace unused. But the frigidarium still offers a moment's rest. They speak softly. Of taxes. Of rumors from the east. Of bandits on the road to Massilia. Of a cousin who joined the monastery in Alls. Religion weaves through all of it. Crosses etched into doorways. Priests in worn wool robes offering blessings in the street. Stories of saints told by mothers to their children, tales of miracles and quiet courage. As the sun arcs westward, the air thickens with warmth. Dust clings to sandaled feet, and the birds grow quieter. It is a time for focused work. In the fields outside the town, tenant farmers bend to their tasks. They are coloni, tied to the land not by chains, but by necessity and law. They owe a share of their crops to the villa's landowner, whose estate lies farther uphill. The owner may not live there, perhaps he resides in Ravenna or Rome, or even Constantinople, but his steward watches carefully. The farmers till with wooden plows, sometimes pulled by oxen. Their clothing is plain, stitched from rough linen, patched many times over. Children scatter birds from the crops. A dog sleeps in the shade of a fig tree. It is a life of repetition. But not of despair. The rhythm is dependable. The seasons come. The rains fall. The earth yields. Sometimes barely enough, sometimes more. In town, artisans labor in workshops that smell of leather, oil, and smoke. A blacksmith hammers a broken hinge into shape. Sparks jump. A potter spins a wheel slowly, shaping clay into vessels that will be fired in a communal kiln, one shared by many, for wood is dear. In a home nearby, a woman weaves cloth on a narrow loom. Her movements are patient. She hums. The threads slide between her fingers like water. As the sun lowers, the light becomes golden, soft, slanted, thick with the dust of the day. This is the hour of return. Farmers finish their work and head back to the town, leading donkeys laden with produce. Children run to meet them. Chickens are gathered into pens. Water is drawn once more from the well. In the richer homes, servants begin preparing the evening meal. Bread is warmed. Lentils stirred. Wine, thin, slightly sour, is poured from clay jugs into simple cups. In a stone chapel near the edge of town, the priest lights oil lamps. Smoke from the wicks curls upward, mingling with incense made from resin and herbs. The congregation arrives slowly, quietly. There are no grand vestments here, no towering choirs, just voices, plain and reverent, rising into the cooling air. As darkness falls, the pace slows. Meals are taken around shared boards. The food is simple: bread, lentils, perhaps dried fruit, goat cheese, and olive oil. In wealthier homes, pork or fish might appear. In poorer quarters, soup thickened with wild greens and leftover grain. Candles flicker. Conversation turns to familiar things: weather, family, saints, and stories. Always stories. Old men tell tales of the empire, of legions long gone, of cities once visited, of emperors they've never seen but speak of as if from memory. Mothers soothe infants, nursing them by firelight. Children drift to sleep to the murmuring of bedtime prayers. The streets grow quiet again. The market is empty. The forums are still. Somewhere, a door creaks closed. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then settles. By nightfall, all is still. The stars return, silent witnesses to a world both ancient and fading. The moon casts long, pale shadows over stones laid centuries before. The roads stretch outward, leading to villages, to cities, to edges of empire where Roman order flickers like a candle in wind. But here, in this town, the rhythm remains. People sleep. The empire may weaken. Emperors may rise and fall. But grain will still be ground. Bread will still be broken. Babies will be born, baptized, buried. A quieter Rome persists, not in armies or decrees, but in lives like these. And so we leave them here, at rest. Their day has ended, as yours now may as well. The rhythm of their lives echoes gently across time, a rhythm of work, of worship, of worry and warmth. It is not glorious. It is not carved in triumphal stone. But it is human. And it is enduring. As you close your eyes, imagine again the quiet streets, the whisper of sandals on dusty stones, the lull of distant voices carried on cool night air. They lived not in the blaze of history's center, but in its warmth. And now, so do you. Imagine yourself, a child of privilege in a crumbling world. Flavius Aetius was born around the year 395 CE, in the Roman province of Dacia Ripensis, along the Danube, near what is now Serbia. His father was a military man, a Roman general of Scythian descent, and his mother may have been noble as well. He was born into the empire's military elite, during a time when the old Roman order still existed, though it was already flickering. But Aetius' childhood would not be spent in the gardens of Rome, nor beneath the golden domes of Constantinople. His youth would take a stranger path. As a boy, perhaps no older than 10, he was given as a hostage to the court of Alaric the Goth. Later, he would live among the Huns. It was a common practice. Hostages were not prisoners, exactly. They were political assurances, living symbols of peace or obedience between powerful leaders. And for young Aetius, this strange, shifting childhood would shape everything that followed. He rode with the Huns, learned their language, slept beneath tents, ate from their fires. He came to understand them, not as the faceless enemy Rome imagined, but as people, warriors, pragmatists. In a sense, Aetius was never truly of Rome after this. He straddled two worlds. By the time he returned to Roman service in his early 20s, Aetius was already seasoned in ways that few Roman nobles were. He entered a Roman military machine that was no longer as rigid, or as glorious, as in centuries past. The legions were fewer. The soldiers were often foreign-born. The empire's enemies were not across oceans, they were in its fields, behind its walls. Aetius began as a comes domesticorum, a commander of the imperial guard. And from there, he ascended swiftly. His greatest weapon was not just his sword, but his ability to navigate the collapsing corridors of Roman power. He played politics with deftness. When the Western court in Ravenna was split between factions loyal to two generals, Bonifacius in Africa and Felix in Italy, Aetius maneuvered like a chess master. He alternately opposed, reconciled, and fought with both. In 432, after a tangled civil conflict with Bonifacius, Aetius emerged wounded, but victorious. Rome's true enemies were no longer beyond the Rhine, but within her own bureaucracy. By the mid-430s, Flavius Aetius held the title of Magister Militum, Master of Soldiers in the West. It was not quite the role of emperor, but in practice, it was the most powerful position in the crumbling Western Empire. Imagine him, now in his early 40s, riding through the fields of Gaul with a hardened cavalry at his back. His face is lined from battle and betrayal. His tunic is practical. His sword, well used. Aetius was not a man of speeches. He was a man of motion. He traveled constantly, north to the Rhine, west to the Atlantic, south to Ravenna, holding together the fragile remnants of empire. Where others faltered, Aetius negotiated. When the Visigoths pushed into Roman lands, he arranged truces. When the Burgundians raided the towns of Gaul, he forged temporary alliances. And above all, when the Huns began their long-shadowed march toward the heart of the empire, Aetius stood ready. He knew them. He had once dined at their fires. It is in the figure of Attila the Hun that Aetius finds his greatest challenge, and, in some strange way, his reflection. Attila, too, was not a madman, as legend sometimes paints him. He was intelligent, strategic, brutal, yes, but also politically savvy. He knew Rome's weaknesses, and he exploited them. In the early 440s, Attila launched raids deep into Roman lands, pushing across the Danube and ravaging the Balkans. He demanded gold, tribute, even a royal bride from the Eastern Empire. Aetius, watching from the west, understood the game. He had, for years, maintained a cautious diplomacy with Attila. Letters, envoys, gifts. He knew the Huns were not a wave to be stopped, but a storm to be redirected. And then, in 451, the storm turned west. Attila crossed the Rhine with an army of staggering size, perhaps numbering hundreds of thousands, though the figures blur between fact and legend. His goal was not simply plunder. He aimed for power. Perhaps even Rome itself. The year 451. A moment suspended in time. It is here that Aetius reaches the pinnacle of his career, and of the Western Empire's final military greatness. Imagine the plains near modern-day Chalons, in northeastern Gaul. The wind is sharp. The earth trampled. The sky, a low gray sheet. On one side, the forces of Attila, mounted Huns, fierce and fast, flanked by subject tribes and mercenaries. On the other, Aetius leads a fragile coalition, Roman troops, Visigothic allies, remnants of once proud legions, and local militias. It was a patchwork army, sown from diplomacy and desperation. The battle is one of the last great engagements of classical antiquity. It is said that the fighting lasted from day into night. That the Visigothic king, Theodoric, was slain. That the dead were so numerous, the fields became a vast silence of fallen forms. Aetius and his allies repelled Attila. They did not destroy him, but they turned him back. And for that moment, Rome breathed again. After the battle, Attila retreated, but not for long. The following year, he invaded Italy. Towns fell. Aquileia was destroyed so thoroughly that legends say its exact site was forgotten. And still, Aetius held firm. He did not meet Attila again in open battle. But neither did he yield. He starved the Huns of supplies, delayed them, sent envoys. Perhaps most crucially, he waited, and trusted time. In 453, Attila died suddenly, perhaps from illness, or a burst blood vessel on his wedding night. His empire fractured. His sons fought one another. The storm passed. Rome remained. And Aetius returned to Ravenna. Older, wearier, triumphant in function, if not in celebration. But Rome was not grateful. In 454, the Western Emperor Valentinian III, young, uncertain, and increasingly jealous of Aetius' power, invited him to court. Accounts differ, but most agree on the core, that in the imperial palace, during a routine audience, the emperor drew a hidden sword and struck Aetius down with his own hand. The man who had saved Rome from Attila. Who had held the provinces together. Who had worn armor longer than some senators had lived. He fell, not in battle, but in marble silence, on polished floors. An advisor is said to have asked the emperor afterward, "You have cut off your right hand with your left." And indeed, within a year, Valentinian himself was murdered, by Aetius' old officers. The empire, already teetering, began to fall faster. Aetius has been called the last of the Romans. Not because he was the last Roman general. Others would follow. But because he embodied something older. A kind of endurance. He did not claim power for himself. He did not name himself emperor. He did not seek glory. He fought to maintain balance. To keep the machinery moving. To hold the edges of empire against the coming dark. And for a while, he succeeded. But Rome was not simply defeated. It decayed. It unraveled from within. No single general, no matter how skilled, could restore what time had worn away. Now, imagine once more, standing at the edge of a ruined Roman road. The sun is low. The stones are warm beneath your feet. You can hear, faintly, the sound of hooves long gone. The creak of leather. The steady breath of a man whose name has faded from most memories. But not all. Flavius Aetius did not save the empire. He did something quieter, something more human. He gave it time. One more breath. One more moment. One more sunrise for a world already dreaming of dusk. Imagine yourself, standing in the gentle stillness of a sunlit meadow in modern-day France. At first glance, it is peaceful. Nothing stirs but the grass. Yet underfoot lies the forgotten skeleton of a Roman villa. Stones once shaped by human hands lie just beneath the earth, some displaced by tree roots, some carefully studied and catalogued by archaeologists, others left as they fell centuries ago. You cannot see the people who once lived here. But if you listen closely, not with ears, but with patient curiosity, you can begin to hear the murmur of their vanished world. The archaeology of the fall of the Roman Empire is not a tale of fire and ruin. It is a story of subtle change. A story of roofs that were never repaired, of streets that slowly filled with earth, of letters that were never answered. It is a story, told in absence. Archaeologists describe the fall of Rome not only through what is found, but often, through what disappears. Coins vanish from certain layers of soil, suggesting trade routes breaking down. Imported pottery becomes rare. Where once fine Samian ware from Italy or North Africa was common, now we find rougher, local vessels, handmade, imperfect, but functional. Bathhouses are abandoned. The hypocaust systems, once marvels of heating technology, fall silent. The floor tiles loosen. Moss grows in corners where once there was steam. In the city of Londinium, modern London, entire districts fell quiet in the 5th century. Streets filled with debris. Civic buildings were looted for stone. In one layer of excavation, a Roman roadway has collapsed slightly, its bricks pressed by the slow tread of time. No fire. No conquest. just abandonment. It's like walking into a home where the owners left quietly, never to return. Across the western provinces, Roman villas once stood as symbols of comfort and continuity. Picture them, mosaic floors glinting in dappled sunlight, courtyards filled with laurel and rosemary, fountains murmuring with flowing water. In southern Britain alone, more than 1,600 Roman villas have been identified. They formed a network of rural estates, self-sufficient, refined, and deeply Roman. But by the mid-5th century, the story shifts. Excavations show rooms partitioned crudely with wooden walls. Mosaic floors covered over with dirt or straw. Fine painted plaster repurposed or burned for lime. One villa at Woodchester, famed for its intricate mosaic, shows signs of slow degradation, repairs made with whatever was at hand, tools left to rust. Some villas were burned. Many were simply left to the elements. And so the countryside changed. Where once there had been Roman estates, there came to be scattered hamlets, timber huts, and small field systems without written records. Rome did not fall here with violence. It faded. Rome's greatness was, in part, urban. Streets in grids. Aqueducts arching over valleys. Forums bustling with orators and vendors. Temples to gods both ancient and newly imported. Yet by the 5th century, Roman cities in the west began to contract. Archaeologists studying Arles, Trier, and even Rome itself note a striking pattern. Walls were built inside the old city limits, shrinking the inhabited space. In some cases, entire districts were walled off and left to the wild. Why? Perhaps for defense. Or perhaps because there were simply fewer people to maintain them. Urban life was expensive. And fragile. When trade slowed and administration faltered, cities lost their luster. In some towns, amphitheaters were repurposed as fortresses. In others, forums were transformed into cemeteries. In the city of Oxama in Hispania, homes were built within the ruins of civic buildings. A kitchen hearth set where once a senator might have stood. It's as if people took shelter in the bones of their former greatness. As the Roman world fell away, a new one took shape, and archaeology reflects that transformation. Christianity, once persecuted and marginal, had by the 5th century become dominant. Churches rose where temples once stood. In Ravenna, rich mosaics shimmer with Christian iconography, lambs, crosses, and saints with serene, gazing eyes. But not all churches were new constructions. Pagan temples were often reused, their idols removed, their altars repurposed. In some cases, statues were buried beneath the floor, carefully, not destroyed, perhaps to avoid sacrilege. This was not always a violent replacement. Often, it was gradual. Quiet. The way ivy climbs a wall, not to destroy it, but to claim it. In cemeteries, the grave goods change. Where once there were offerings to Mercury or Mars, we begin to find crosses carved into stone. Simpler burials. But not always poorer. The faith had changed. The people remained. Excavation is not only about the objects found, but also about the spaces between them. The absence of roads maintained. The silence of collapsed granaries. The fading of inscriptions, worn by time and no longer replaced. In a villa in Gaul, researchers found layers of animal dung over a once grand dining room. Not because of invasion, but because, eventually, it became a shelter for livestock. No ceremony. No destruction. Just a gradual, silent shift from civility to survival. And in that shift, the archaeology shows something profound. A world that stopped thinking of itself as Roman. Even today, many questions remain. What caused the decline of certain towns before others? Why did some provinces retain Roman ways into the 7th century, while others did not? In Britain, for instance, the so-called sub-Roman period remains deeply mysterious. After the legions withdrew around 410, written records become scarce. Archaeologists rely on post holes, refuse pits, and pottery shards to reconstruct what happened. One theory is that local Romano-British elites tried to maintain order, but without the bureaucracy, they fell into fragmented rule. Others suggest migration, perhaps even displacement, by Saxon newcomers. But the material record resists easy answers. The truth, like the earth, is layered, complex, fragmentary. Like waking from a dream you can only half remember. Yet decline does not always mean collapse. In many places, people kept living on the land. They farmed. They worshipped. They raised children. But they no longer thought of themselves as Roman. This is perhaps the greatest mystery of the fall of Rome, not why it ended, but how it transformed. In southern Gaul, for example, churches continued to use Latin for centuries. Monks copied Roman texts, preserving them for future ages. In North Africa, under Vandal rule, Roman customs persisted in modified forms. Even in the ruins of villas, we sometimes find evidence of adaptation, hearths dug where marble floors once lay. Tools forged from scraps of older buildings. A Roman water pipe repurposed into a fence post. Archaeology reveals not just endings, but improvisations. A culture shedding its skin. So now, let us pause. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture a landscape not of war, but of quiet change. A vineyard growing wild where once soldiers marched. A cracked cistern echoing with the calls of birds. A ring dropped centuries ago, now nestled in the earth. These are the voices of the past. Not loud. Not dramatic. But constant. In the end, the fall of the Roman Empire did not erase its people. It simply shifted the soil beneath their feet. And centuries later, archaeologists, gentle diggers of memory, bring them softly into the light once more. Imagine yourself, walking through two different doors. One leads to marble halls filled with echoes of laughter and silk. The other, to cramped alleyways where shadows linger and simple meals are shared. Close your eyes, if you will, and picture a grand domus, a Roman house belonging to the wealthy elite during the waning years of the Western Empire. The walls are high and painted in warm reds and ochres. Frescoes depict mythic scenes, Venus rising from the sea, Bacchus pouring wine. The air is fragrant with the scent of olive oil and fresh herbs from the atrium garden. Marble columns rise to meet a skylight opening to the sky, where gentle rain might fall and trickle down into the impluvium, the shallow pool collecting water. Silk drapes sway lightly with a soft breeze. Servants move silently in their sandals, tending the hearth or polishing bronze lamps. In the triclinia, the dining rooms, reclining guests share banquets of fish, honeyed fruits, and imported spices. The clink of glass cups filled with watered wine punctuates quiet conversations. The elite dress in finely woven togas or silk tunics. Jewelry glints, rings, bracelets, and delicate chains crafted by skilled artisans. Wealth is visible, but not ostentatious. Within this social world, a complex system of relationships thrived. The wealthy aristocrat was often a patron, a protector, benefactor, and leader. Clients, ranging from freedmen to lesser nobles, depended on their patron for legal aid, food during hard times, and social advancement. Imagine a morning scene where a client approaches the patron's home at dawn, seeking a favor or assistance. The patron listens, nods thoughtfully, then offers guidance or coins. This system, while hierarchical, created networks of obligation and loyalty. It was a social rhythm that held many lives together as the empire's official structures faltered. But even among the rich, the signs of empire's decay were visible. Some estates suffered from neglect. Landowners could no longer maintain vast farms or guard their territories against raiders. In letters from the time, aristocrats complain of dwindling revenues, rising taxes, and the loss of workers, many of whom fled to safer regions or cities. Luxury became more fragile. Yet, many elites sought refuge in religious devotion. Basilicas rose, adorned with gold mosaics. Bishops gained influence once held by senators. The late Roman aristocrat was often a man of faith, trying to find meaning in a world shifting beneath his feet. Now imagine stepping out of that marble villa and into the narrow, uneven streets of a Roman town or city. The alleyways are narrow and winding. The air smells of baking bread, but also smoke and refuse. Children play with rough wooden toys. Merchants hawk vegetables, salted fish, or cloth. Homes here are cramped, 1 or 2 rooms, often sharing walls with neighbors. Floors are dirt or roughly paved stones. You can see the difference between these homes and those of the wealthy, their simplicity, the lack of decoration. Families cook over open fires. Water must be fetched from public fountains or wells. Clothing is coarse, homespun wool or linen. The poor worked in many ways, as craftsmen, laborers, dockworkers, or street vendors. Some were coloni, tenant farmers tied to the land of wealthy estates, bound by obligation but also providing a crucial workforce. Imagine the rhythm of their day: early rising, long hours of physical toil under the sun or in dark workshops. Their diets were simple: bread, vegetables, beans, sometimes salted fish or meat on rare occasions. Disease was a constant companion. Poor sanitation and crowded living conditions made illnesses common. Yet, life among the poor was not only hardship. Communities often formed tight bonds. Neighbors shared food, helped in times of sickness, and celebrated festivals together. Roman religion permeated daily life, but local and folk traditions blended with Christian practices. In many towns, simple temples or shrines dotted the streets. People offered small gifts, coins, grains, or herbs. Children learned trades early. Storytelling, music, and communal meals were moments of joy amid struggle. Outside the cities, rural life held its own rhythms. Villages were scattered. Life centered on the seasons. Harvests were a blessing, drought a danger. While the countryside did not have the political intrigues of the city, it was far from peaceful. Raids from migrating tribes were a constant threat. Yet, the land also offered refuge, a place to grow food, to live quietly away from the chaos of imperial politics. It is impossible to ignore that this period also held shadows. Political assassinations, raids by barbarian groups, and civil unrest colored daily life. However, the violence was often not a sudden blaze but a slow burn. Occasionally, the elite might find themselves under siege in fortified villas, or the poor might flee before marauding bands. Disease swept through both rich and poor alike, plague, dysentery, and respiratory illnesses thinning populations. But life continued, resilient. In the end, despite vast differences in wealth and status, all shared the uncertainty of a world in transition. The aristocrat might look out from a high balcony, hearing the sounds of the marketplace below. The laborer might pause in his work to glance toward the same sky. Both lived in a world where the old order was fading, and a new, unknown dawn awaited. Imagine yourself now walking slowly back through those streets. The fading light casts long shadows. You hear the soft laughter of children playing, the murmurs of conversation, the distant clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestones. Life, in all its contrasts, flows gently onward. Not triumphant. Not defeated. Simply enduring. Imagine yourself, once again, beneath the wide, starry sky of the old Roman world. The roads lie quiet. The hearths have burned low. Somewhere, a dog barks in the distance, and then silence again. The empire has not vanished in fire or flood, but has faded, gently, like the last notes of a familiar song. As we draw the curtain across these hours we've spent together, let us step back and see what we have come to understand. The fall of Rome was not a singular event. It was a long unfolding, a gentle loosening of the threads that once held a vast tapestry together. In every broken villa, every fading market town, every road left to weeds, we find evidence not of sudden collapse, but of quiet change. We began our journey in the rhythm of daily life, where bakers, farmers, and children continued on, even as the world around them changed in ways they could not fully name. We met a man, Flavius Aetius, who stood in the last light of Roman order, trying to hold back the dark. His life reminds us that sometimes, greatness is measured not in victory, but in endurance. We wandered among ruins and relics, where the past rests silently beneath soil and stone. Where archaeologists uncover what words have forgotten. And where the smallest fragment, of tile, of bone, of a rusted coin, can speak entire volumes. And we looked at the great contrast between the powerful and the powerless. Between marble and mud brick. Between senators reciting poetry and field workers scratching a life from the earth. The two ends of a society stretched so far apart, they could no longer hold. Rome did not fall in a single night. It fell in rhythms. The rhythm of a fountain going dry. The rhythm of a tax collector no longer arriving. The rhythm of a song once sung in Latin, now drifting into something new. A quiet reshaping of the world. As cities thinned, as roads grew quiet, new forms of life emerged. Kingdoms. Villages. Monasteries. And though the Roman world was ending, its memory, its echoes, continued on. In our languages. In our laws. In the roads that still run straight through forests and fields. Rome did not disappear. It became something else. And now, here you are. Thousands of years removed, yet closer than you think. You live in a world shaped by this ancient past. By its ideas, its architecture, its structure, and its stories. You speak its words, sometimes without knowing. You walk its paths. You carry its legacy. And as you rest here, in the hush of night, you can feel that connection. Not loudly. Not in grandeur. But softly, like the distant rhythm of footsteps on a forgotten road. What once seemed terrifying, the end of empire, the collapse of greatness, now lies far behind us, worn smooth by the passage of time. There is a strange comfort in this. To know that even the greatest structures fall. That all things change. That decline is not always disaster. That people find ways to live, even as old orders pass away. There is peace in that knowledge. A steady, calming peace. So, now, let go. Let the images of domed temples and dusty streets drift into the shadows of your mind. Let the voices of senators and soldiers fade into silence. Let the crumbling stones and slow-turning wheels of the past become quiet, gentle echoes. You have walked with emperors and monks. With merchants and masons. You have seen the end of an age, not with panic, but with stillness. Now it is time to rest. The past will keep its watch. The ruins will wait. And history, like the stars above, will remain. Thank you for joining us on this slow, deep journey through time. Sleep well. And let history carry you gently into the night.